old building, not many outlets.
Oh.
They put like awkward places for outlets in Tucker.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like how the study rooms are right on the table.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, the table, like some of the tables are like that, but then you like when you're downstairs, if there's not any study rooms or anything open, it's really awkward trying to find somewhere to sitting on the floor. Sitting on the floor is an option, or sitting in like this one table near the bathrooms because that's where the outlet is. It's kind of weird.
Okay. Let's see. I guess we'll go ahead and get started because it's enough after 4. I'll first ask, do you guys have any questions for me about any areas that you know you're going to need a little bit more input on? Or just kind of want me to go through the test and we'll go
Back
over
to
it?
the beginning of it with
Behaviorism? Behaviorism? Got behaviorism on this test, right?
Yeah.
All right, so behaviorism. Classical conditioning. Are you guys familiar?
That's Pavlov's.
Yep, Pavlov's classical conditioning. You guys familiar with how to draw out a scenario of classical conditioning?
An unconditional response and unconditional stimulus,
Uh-huh.
and then you have to pair it with a neutral stimulus. And it makes a conditioned response.
Does everybody remember that? That you've got your unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. So this is basically something natural that just happens, right? What did we refer to it as? The unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. What do we refer to it as? Something causes something else to happen. Like a trigger is the stimulus. The trigger causes a response. That relationship is a, remember if I blow air puff in your eye, you blink. Reflex. It's a reflex, yeah. So it's a reflex. So it starts with a reflex. So always remember here that you are going to start with some sort of reflexive tendency here. Okay. So if we say fear, so if we're going to teach you guys to fear, that's exactly what I was going to say. If I can teach you guys to fear this Diet Pepsi right here, what would we do? Okay, so let's fill this all out.
What did you say?
To fear the Diet Pepsi. Uh-huh.
So responses would be fear.
Okay, so responses would be fear, right? Remember, every time with the response, it's going to be the same. So you can always...
have to pick a reflex that causes fear.
Okay, yeah? So what reflex, or what stimulus might cause fear?
Spiders.
If you see a spider, or if I see a bug,
I
right?
see like a cockroach.
Cockroach, spider, okay, right? So we'll just go with bugs, right? So if we saw a bug here, it would cause us to fear. Okay. What's the neutral stimulus? Pepsi.
So
And
like when you see Pepsi for the conditioned stimulus.
Yeah, so again, yeah, remember
brings
the
out fear.
neutral stimulus is Pepsi, the conditioned stimulus is going to be Pepsi. So what do I do to make you guys fear Pepsi? What do you have to do?
Pair bugs with the Pepsi.
You pair it several times, right? So when you say pair, what does that mean?
Like when you see Pepsi, you see a bug.
Okay, yeah, so put it together at the same time. Okay, so through repeated pairings, then we have the Pepsi will cause you to fear. Okay, so that's basically classical conditioning here. So when we talk about classical conditioning in education, what type of responses are most likely to be classically conditioned?
Feeling fear when you, the example you gave us, feeling fear when you see the teacher come home and folder for test.
So
The
fear.
color folder.
So fear would be one. What else? Happiness.
Not liking a subject.
Not liking, so dislike, all of these are emotions. Okay, so when we talk about classical conditioning in the classroom, it's usually emotion, based on emotions. Bless you. Okay. All right, any other questions about classical conditioning? I'll go back on that if there's other stuff that you guys need to know about it. Okay, what is the other type of behaviorist principle? Operant conditioning. Okay, so what happens in operant conditioning? If you were gonna sum it up, right, sum it up in one sentence.
Instrumental learning.
There's instrumental learning. But what is operant conditioning mainly based on?
Behaviors.
Your behaviors are influenced by consequences. Okay, so the importance of consequences. So remember with operant conditioning, consequences are important. Okay, we talk about praises, we talk about reinforcers and punishers. Okay, what does reinforcer do?
Strengthens.
A reinforcer strengthens behavior, and a punisher
Takes it. No, it's as a confusion. It decreases behavior.
right. You might want to just right when you get your test out, just write it down, so you won't get confused. That reinforce strengthens behavior, punisher weakens the behavior. Okay. Positive means
You give something.
you give something. Negative means
You take away something.
you take away. Weakens behavior.
I know I got these confused last semester a lot in psychology.
In just your general psych class. It's easy to get them confused, but just write it down and then go back to what you've written. If you can remember, reinforcer strengthens or reinforces, right? Punisher decreases. Positive means add, negative means take away. You'll be able to figure it out. Okay, so when we say that a teacher is going to allow you to get out of your final exam if you do well throughout the semester.
It's negative.
Okay, it's reinforcement. Why reinforcement?
It's
Strengthens.
Strengthens your behavior, right? You're doing better. And it's negative because,
It's taking away something away.
right, okay, exactly. So be able to do that. Be able to, if I give you a particular scenario, be able to tell me whether or not it's negative or positive, reinforcement or punishment. Okay, you should be able to figure that out though.
But those scenarios are always going to have to identify one of both. So are those scenarios, it's either going to be reinforced or punished, and on top of that, positive or negative?
Yeah, so you'll either have negative punishment, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, positive reinforcement. So those will be your choices. Okay, so what happens, what's timeout? What is that considered?
some negative punishment. You're taking away their time to socialize or
Yeah,
something.
you take away their time to socialize, so that means it's
A
negative, okay? And then you usually get timeout because,
You did something bad.
Yeah.
So it's punishment.
yeah, it's usually punishment, because you've done something bad that the teacher wants to weaken that behavior, right? Okay, so usually you get timeout if, you're acting up. So we want to weaken that behavior, and in order to weaken the behavior, we take away your freedom. Okay, so that's timeout. Okay. Let's see. What about, can you guys tell me what shaping is? In operant conditioning. Remember Piggins doing serving all the way around?
Small steps to a positive.
When they get closer to the behavior that you want, you give encouragement.
Like hot and cold.
Yeah, like the hot and cold. So as they're getting closer, you reinforce them along the way.
Do we need to know the long name or something?
No.
But you did say it might be extra credit. You hinted.
All right. It might be extra credit.
So what was it again? It was so long. It didn't-
Successive.
Differential reinforcement of successive approximation.
differential reinforcement of successive approximations.
Like who figure out?
Yeah, I need it.
Of successive approximations?
Yes, differential reinforcement of successive approximations.
Did we get 2 extra points on our next test?
I am just, what I've decided is that you'll just have extra credit column, and so then I'll just put 2 on there.
Just start this.
Okay, so shaping, what is that again?
Reinforce the subject gets closer to desired behavior.
Okay. So if I were to say that somebody was, basically if I was teaching somebody how to swing a baseball bat, that I would give them reinforcement for holding the bat correctly. Okay, then give them reinforcement for getting in the right stance. Then give them reinforcement for swinging it correctly. Okay, so I'm breaking it up into more manageable steps along the way.
I remember the list about the homework. Like you had the student that wouldn't finish their homework, so
Mhm.
you reinforce them for putting their name on the paper.
Exactly. Okay, so know that one. What about pre-med principle?
Teas and ice cream.
Peas and ice cream, also called grandma's rule.
Just reinforcing low frequency behavior with high frequency behavior.
So
Uh-huh.
they eat their broccoli, they get ice cream.
So yeah, so if they, what is the purpose of the pre-med?
You get them to do
Basically problem.
a desired behavior first. They get the desired reward by doing something unpleasant or undesired to them.
Okay, so yeah, you use something that they like to do to motivate them to do something else. Right. Okay, understand what self-regulation is. Who can tell me what that is?
Be able to take responsibility of your own learning. It can be like, learn yourself,
Mhm.
know where and take responsibility or just I don't know, put it in words.
So yeah, to know how, really when we're talking about self-regulated learners here in this class, we're talking about students who know how to learn for themselves, okay, and who can engage in the strategies that they need to succeed. Okay, so they regulate their behavior, regulate their study habits in order to succeed.
Kind of like note cards. Isn't that when we talked about
Mhm.
like
Yeah,
note cards and
yeah.
stuff like that? Okay.
Exactly, like using note cards or just any strategy that works for you. Did I give my example that I used to teach my material for classes to my stuffed animals? And that was in college, so problematic. But it was helpful because teaching it helps you learn it. Okay. All right. We talked about pre-med principle. We talked about that. You know what the token economy is. Why is the token economy helpful?
Because it acknowledges the behavior, but you're not giving something valuable every time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And
You said, doesn't reward it every time?
yeah, it doesn't reward it every time. Uh-huh. And you can be flexible with it.
What was that?
That you're not rewarded every time. It's basically, or well, you can be
what?
rewarded.
What was the term?
Oh, sorry. The term is token economy. Okay, and basically in the token economy, we're using something else, like a sticker or a token, something that doesn't have value on its own, but is only valued because it's paired with something else that has value. Okay, so we use that to motivate students. Okay. Let's see where we're at. Yeah, know about, schedules of reinforcement.
So like the and like the intervals and the
Yeah,
variable.
know the partial reinforcement effect. Do you guys remember what that is?
Is it partial reinforcement effect?
Partial reinforcement effect.
You don't reinforce it every time,
Mhm.
you only do it occasionally.
So if you, basically what it says is that if you reinforce intermittently, okay, again, that's just, you're not reinforcing every single time. If you do that, the behavior is going to last a lot longer. It's gonna persist longer even when it's not being reinforced
Is
anymore.
that thing you draw with the thing on the board?
You drew like the web.
I'm not sure. Are we talking about schema?
No. I think you drew something. I have to.
Oh,
The fixed
okay,
interval
yeah,
and
for the
then
intervals, yeah, I gotcha.
This.
Yeah,
So-
that has to do with the different schedules where we have fixed interval, fixed ratio, variable interval, and variable ratio. But yeah, so I did, basically say, yeah, I think you guys all have it, where you have continuous and intermittent schedules.
Yeah.
I know which one you're talking about, but I'm trying to look for the like.
This is what it is.
Oh,
So then
yeah.
you go down into,
Sorry,
what did I say first, ratio,
Intermittent, and then like there's interval, ratio,
Okay.
variable, fixed.
interval, ratio,
Like a paycheck is a fixed interval.
uh-huh. Send me that. Variable. Okay, so really if you just know what each of these means, you'll be able to identify which schedule it's being reinforced on. Okay, so interval has to do with what?
Time.
Time, remember that. Interval is time. So really if you want to think about a time interval, just think about a time interval. Okay, so time interval could be days, minutes, hours, seconds, whatever. Okay, so anytime if you see day, hour, whatever in there, just know it's interval. Okay? Ratio has to do with number of responses. Okay, so if they had to do 10 actions, okay, so number of responses ratio. What about fixed? What's that mean?
Like a fixed number.
Yeah, it's fixed. It's the same every time. It's the same amount of time every time, or same number of responses every time. Variable means it changes. Okay, it's not always going to be the same number.
It varies.
Exactly. Do you guys learn well with that? I always like to pick apart the words and say, all right, well, why is it called this? And that's,
I pick it apart.
and sometimes that helps. For example, variable and fixed, that's pretty easy to understand, right? It's fixed because it's fixed or it varies, right? Okay. All right, yeah, so know that. I'll probably ask a question or two about a particular reinforcement schedule, and then you'll just have to identify what it is. Okay. No continuous. What happens with continuous?
It's every time.
Okay. And what would probably be the best schedule or best way to reinforce somebody if you want to teach them a new skill? If you want them to learn the new skill really quickly, what should you do? Continuous.
Fast.
Uh-huh.
But once they start like picking it up, what you want to move to like fixed ratio or variable ratio?
Mhm.
Like that.
Yeah, probably variable ratio. So at first you want to start with continuous, so they learn it very quickly, and then move to intermittent. Okay, but specifically a variable ratio would be good.
And you said that will teach new behavior quickest.
A continuous schedule. Remember, continuous schedule will they'll learn the task quicker, but they're also going to it'll extinguish quicker as well.
It'll also make them think that they're going to get something every time they do it, too.
Exactly. So when we talk about the partial reinforcement effect, okay, or the PRE, remember that there's two components of it. One, that the intermittent, if you reinforce on an intermittent schedule, they're going to learn it and they're going to continue with that behavior. They're going to persist with that behavior for a longer period of time. But also note that on a continuous schedule, they learn it quickly, but will lose it very quickly too. Okay. So try to add both of those if I happen to ask you about partial reinforcement. Effect. Just I couldn't think of what the E was for a second there.
We'll be going into great detail with the partial reinforcement.
No, just basically what I said. All right, so let's move on to information processing. Know the difference between maintenance and elaborative rehearsal? Can you guys tell me the difference?
What two words did you say?
Maintenance and elaborative rehearsal. Okay, again, this is just in the name. Maintenance rehearsal is your,
That's just the basics.
So it goes the same, like, I think what maintaining on.
yeah, you're just rehearsing it to maintain it in your mind for a little bit. So whenever you think about maintenance rehearsal, think about like that telephone number that you're trying to remember. Let me just give you a telephone number real quick. You just say it over and over so you can maintain it in your mind long enough to use it. Okay, so you just say it over and over and over again. And you compare that with elaborative rehearsal, which is
Rehearse to keep.
Which is your PIN number.
the PIN number that you guys remember, right?
Or you.
Yeah. So you
It turned out very good for you then.
I know. If you guys ever got my card, you guys would not have a lot of money, but you'd have some. All right, so the elaborative rehearsal basically means that you are going to try to rehearse it, so you're going to think about it more. Okay, so remember, rehearsal is just, repeating it, thinking about it often. Okay. But elaborative rehearsal means that I'm thinking about it, but I'm also associating it with other things. I'm elaborating on it. I'm adding to it. I'm not just simply saying, Pavlov classical conditioning, Pavlov classical conditioning, Pavlov classical conditioning. I'm adding to it, right? I'm thinking about how it relates to my experience. I'm thinking about how it relates to other things.
Because if it's meaningful, you remember it better.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so know that difference. What's chunking?
That's where you put what something else, right? So,
Yeah.
Chunking, just like you take chunks of information is what it sounds like.
Yeah. You chunk information together. Okay, so you remember things instead of bits of information, you remember them as groups. Kind of
The
organize
double
it.
thing.
The what?
The double thing with baseball.
Oh yeah, that
Organizing
that
the
helps.
information
Yep.
item.
That would be chunking. Let's see. What is the benefit of chunking? There's two things I said that were
it
beneficial.
expands our short-term memory.
Yeah, it expands your short term, right? Because we only have how much information in our short term?
5 to 9.
5 to 9, exactly. So, or 7
7
plus
plus
or minus 2, right? Which is the same thing. So we have 5 to 9 bits of information. So again, if we chunk, then we get more per bit, right? Okay. If we have just small bits of information, that's all we get. But if we chunk and make each of our bits larger, we get a whole lot more information.
Was that thing you did with the thing here? You put it together with the pens or whatever it was?
That was the discovery learning,
That
so
was
we'll get to
discovery.
that in a second. This one I talked about the change purse example.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, you remember where you have your little wallet, and if you have 7 pennies in there, you only get 7 cents, but if you make your bits larger, so if I make, instead of a penny, I use a quarter, I can hold a lot more money. So it's the same thing as our
Chunk
memory.
change.
You can chunk change, right? If that helps you remember it, there you go. Do you remember what type of strategy that would be?
It's associative.
Paired associate. Yeah, good job. See, you're already learning.
And you said the two benefits were expand short-term
Oh,
memory.
we didn't do the other one. So expand short-term memory, and the other one is
Better understanding.
you end up having better understanding, but it gets stored easier. Okay, when you organize things, so when you chunk it, it's organized, and it's easier to store when you organize information. All right, can you guys tell me real quickly, Atkinson and Shiffrin's model, the 3-component model of memory, it starts with what?
Sensory.
Sensory register. Okay, what can you tell me about the sensory register?
The environment feeds into it.
Environment feeds into it,
It's reels.
Taking everything you.
taking everything.
The cocktail party.
You've got your reels. What is a cocktail party? What is that? What does the cocktail party tell us about sensory?
You know everything that's going on, but you're not processing it.
Yeah.
Just
And then when do you start processing it?
When someone interrupts.
until it gets your attention.
When something gets your attention. So in the cocktail party phenomenon, somebody says your name and then you say, oh, I should pay attention to this. Okay, so really you were processing everything that was going on, right? So you were processing everything, but you didn't only pay attention to it when it was your name.
Is Shiffrin in here?
Atkinson and Shiffrin.
You said
I'll probably say Atkinson and Shiffrin's 3-component model of memory. Actually, I didn't, but I will change that. Maybe I will, maybe I
I
won't.
did it like that, SCHIFR.
Okay, so, all right, so we've got that. Sensory register, you pay attention, then it goes to short term. You can hold 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information. Chunking is helpful in short term. What's the difference between short term or working memory? And as far as our book, we're going to talk about them similarly. Yeah.
Working memory is another one.
Yeah, so short-term and working memory, we're going to use it synonymously. I think I've mainly used working memory on here, though. Okay. Okay, so how does the information get into long-term memory?
Rehearsal.
So, rehearsal,
Or like, can it be like something you experience something like dramatic, or does that go into when you're a little kid, for example?
there are circumstances where if you have like a traumatic event or that flashbulb memory like we talked about, that will go in your mind and it'll be there forever, really, without you having to rehearse it. But in general, rehearsal is how it gets to long-term memory. Rehearsal can be maintenance rehearsal or elaborative. So if you said elaboration, that's sort of a type of rehearsal. Okay, so the maintenance rehearsal, that can still get into your long-term memory. Okay, like I said, a phone number, if you've dialed that phone number enough times, you're going to remember it, right? Even though you never did elaborate on it. So it can still get into your long-term, it's just more difficult. Okay. But if I said that you had a thought in your head, and you kept it in your head for a while, what would that be? So you kept thinking about it in your head for a while. And you kept thinking it over and over again. So yeah, you're just rehearsal in general is what I'm looking for. All right, I think you should get that one without me going over that.
long-term memory just obtained by rehearsal.
Huh?
For long-term memory, you just want to remember it
Rehearsal.
by rehearsal.
Yeah. And how much information is in long-term memory? Unlimited. Okay. And how long can you hold it in there?
Ever and ever.
As long as you live.
Yep. Okay, what is the levels of processing? Levels of processing theory.
Stimuli is processed at different levels.
Yeah.
Retains info that receives
You retain information better if it's been through more thorough processing. Okay, so we process information at different levels, visually, auditorily, and through meaning. Okay, if we process it on the highest level, we're going to be more likely to remember it. Okay, and the highest level of processing is meaning.
Can you repeat that one more time? It says you retain and process info at different levels, and then it was what now?
We can process information in different levels.
Yeah.
The highest level is semantic, which is based on meaning. Okay, and so if you think about something in regards to its meaning, you're going to remember it better. Okay, so if you process it at the highest level, okay, and the other levels were visual, auditory, and then meaning.
So is the semantic higher? Or, because I have visually, auditory, and then meaning.
Yeah.
So it's upside down.
No, meaning is, the meaning is the highest.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, semantic and meaning is the same thing, but just go with meaning. It's fine.
Semantic, I thought that was.
It's another type of memory, but that's why we'll just talk about it in terms of meaning here.
The orders of significant, like you said, semantic. What comes next after those? Like, it's a certain order.
Of levels of processing?
Yeah.
There's visual first. Well, visual is the lowest level of processing.
So,
Yeah. Auditory second,
it's
and then meaning. Yeah. So everybody understand that? Okay. So the highest level is on meaning. And basically semantic means meaning. But we also talk about the different types of memory. We talk about, do you guys remember the different types of memory that they talked about? That different types of long-term memory. Procedural, episodic, and semantic. Okay. Know those three,
what did you say?
and if you know those three, you'll be fine. Procedural, semantic, and episodic.
You spelled it right.
Those are three different types of.
Long-term memory, or it's like how long-term memory is divided. But I don't go into that much, so as long as you just know those and know what they are, you should be fine. But remember, procedural has to do with like brushing your teeth or walking. Episodic is like an episode of your life, sort of like an autobiographical memory. And semantic is just a fact. Okay. All right.
Semantic was back.
Yeah.
So procedure, skill, semantic, fact, episodic memory.
It's like a autobiographical memory, but yeah, that's fine, because they're all memories, so. So like an episode of your life is the way I like to think about it.
It's like a
It's like a personal memory. I think about it that way.
reality show in your head, or a documentary in your head.
It's like
Yeah.
So the episodic is the memory. I'm
They're all memories.
Yeah.
Autobiographical.
Yeah.
It's all long-term
Because
memories.
we've moved past levels of processing now. Now we're talking about 3 different forms of memory in basically in your long-term memory. Okay. Did you see that we moved past levels of processing?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So do you have the 3 now? Procedural. Remember, it was like walking, brushing your teeth. Something that's really automatic. You don't even really think about it. Okay, it's typically an action, but not always. Episodic. Okay, you guys said like a reality show, your episodes of your life. And then semantic is just a fact. So any fact that doesn't have anything to do with personal memory. So, there's 0 calories in a Diet Pepsi.
There's 50 states.
Right, exactly. Okay, there we go. Let's go on. Oh, dual code process. What's that?
Visual and auditory.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
to remember.
Yeah, if you process things in 2 different codes, usually visual and auditory, you're gonna remember it better. Primacy and recency effect. You guys remember those?
The list thing, right?
Mm-hmm. So if I gave you guys a list of words to remember, what are you likely gonna remember best?
First and
First
last.
time.
The first bit and then the last bit, right? Okay, so what does that tell a teacher?
Important stuff first, important stuff.
Okay, so important stuff first, and then review at the end. We try to summarize everything, all the important details at the end. Okay,
So you said no, could you repeat those two terms?
primacy and recency. So the primacy effect is that you're going to remember the stuff at the beginning. Recency is you're going to remember the stuff at the end because it's most recent.
So you would say teach most important and then review.
Yeah, you could say that.
So like primacy, primary first, recency, recent.
Exactly. I think that's exactly where the names came from.
Going on when we take our test.
It'll interfere with my test taking.
It might. Thank you for reminding me that. I might check and see if there will be another room available just in case I come in here and it's acting up.
Oh wait, no, you learn better in the same spot you're sitting in.
There's something to that too. I guess we'll have to decide what's going to be more of a.
Study and
Benefit
chew some
for you
gum
guys.
and then chew that same gum on the same day.
That's what
Uh-huh.
I'm doing right now.
Very good. We'll see if it works. All right, let me just make sure. I think you're pretty good with that.
I have difficulty with the facilitation and inhibition.
Okay.
Inhibition.
All
You're
right,
like,
I can't even say it. Inhibition.
gotcha.
it's okay.
Okay, let me see.
Like I'm looking at it now, but when I try to like recall it,
Okay, basically, all that is saying is that things that, it's hard to sum them both up. We'll just talk about interference. So there's things that can interfere with our learning, right? So sometimes we don't remember things well because something in the past is makes it difficult for us to learn something new. Right? So this old information is making it difficult for me to learn something new. Okay? So what is that?
Retroactive information.
If it's going
Or forward.
forward,
So proactive.
proactive. And like I said, really I think the easiest way is just diagram it out. So just have this be your timeline here. Okay. Eventually, after you've done this several times, it'll come automatic to you. But since you're learning it for this class and you may not use this again, hopefully you will use the term again, but at this moment it's probably best for you to diagram it out just so you can
learn it visually and
and work your way through it. Okay, so timeline. If I say that, okay, here's a good example. Any of you guys drive stick shift?
no.
Okay.
It's a bad idea.
So have any of you guys tried to drive stick shift?
Today did great.
Okay. So you've tried to drive stick shift. So
It's cold.
to begin with, you've learned how to drive on an automatic, right? Okay, so automatic, right? So that's how you initially learn. Okay, so then now, so the old information, what you already knew was how to drive an automatic, right? Now you're trying to learn on the stick shift. Okay. So what happens when you are trying to learn on the stick shift?
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you make a big mess of it, right? You start doing what you would do in the regular car, right? So this old information, what you already knew about driving, is making it difficult for you to learn this new information, right? So then just draw your arrow. This old information is going this way to make it difficult to learn here. Okay, so because it's going forward, that's proactive. Okay. Okay, I'm going to use, I don't know if I want to use the same example or not, but we'll try it right now. So maybe I used to use automatic. Now I've learned how to do a stick shift. Okay? So I've learned very well how to drive a stick shift, and I've been driving a stick shift all the time. Right? So then, so it's still the same thing, automatic and stick shift, right? I learned the stick shift second. Okay, but now that I've learned the stick shift, if I ever try to do automatic again, well, now I can't remember how to do it. Right? I'm having difficulty now going back to automatic because I've learned stick shift.
It's retro.
And now that's retroactive. Okay. I hope that doesn't mess you up that I've used the same examples here, but you guys understand what I'm saying.
That kind of helps me understand it a little bit better.
Okay.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
How do you know the difference between the interference and facilitation? If they're both, they can either both be either retroactive or proactive.
Okay. So the facilitation, you're not going to know whether it's going to happen or not. Like you can't predict that, oh, it's going to help you or it's going to hurt you, right? But what you can do is say, okay, well, if in this scenario, if having this previous experience driving an automatic helps the person, so if it helps them learn something new, that's going to be facilitation.
Facilitating is help.
Yep.
So basic knowledge,
It says a
having
word.
basic knowledge helps you learn a new skill better.
Uh-huh. That would be facilitative. Okay. Can you guys think of some examples? Okay, right here we talked about interference.
Like an example could be for facilitation was like you know how to rollerblade so you can ice skate or
Okay.
inline skate.
All right, so first you learned rollerblading? Rollerblading? Is that what we're gonna say? Okay. And then next you tried inline skating. Okay. So, knowing how to rollerblade makes it easier for you to learn how to inline skate. Is that what you're saying?
Or inline skating to like ice skating.
Okay.
Well, they both are the.
So if it makes it easier, it's facilitation.
So you want me to put ice skating here? Whatever. We'll just do rollerblading, ice skating, or whatever. Okay. Whatever it is. So now I want to get this right. I don't know why. So inline skating to ice skating? Is that work? Or is that the same thing?
No, it's different. Like yeah.
Okay. So inline skating is going to help you with ice skating, right? And knowing inline skating in the past helps you learn how to ice skate. Is that what we're saying here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what happens? What do I do with my arrow? Goes forward. So we know because my arrow is going forward that it's proactive, and because it's helping me learn, facilitation, right?
So it's proactive facilitation.
Uh-huh. Okay. Let me see. Where I have that. Okay, and so then same thing with retroactive. If so I guess I'll use the same example again. So if you started ice skating a lot, then you go back to inline skating and realize, hey, I'm much better at inline skating now because I learned this new skill of ice skating. That would be retroactive facilitation. Okay. That make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not heavy on that. You will need to know it, but there's not going to be a lot of questions on that. If you can do that, you'll get it right. Okay. You know the importance of attention. All right, so I think we can move on to constructivism now.
So that's the importance of attention.
Yeah, but we kind of already talked about that.
What did you say? The next.
Importance of attention. Now we're going to talk about constructivism. Okay. Discovery learning, sometimes it's chaotic. What can you do to make sure that discovery learning actually is helpful?
Scaffold.
You scaffold, but there's a specific term for it, where the teacher is helping the students, and scaffolding them, organizing it. It's some sort of
Mediated learning.
discovery learning.
Mediated learning.
Not mediated learning, but
Facilitated.
no, it's just guided discovery learning. Okay, that's just a term that we had. Guided discovery helps. Guided discovery.
Okay, so you said discovery learning, how to make it more intense.
To make it work. Because remember when I did my example of discovery learning over here where we figured out prime numbers? Okay. It can be chaotic. Students may not get to the right point, right? Remember we talked about some issues with discovery learning? And so they may not actually learn the information if they are left to their own devices, right? So the teacher needs to guide
So
them.
kind of like the M&M thing you do in like elementary school, where like they give you like the fun size packet of M&Ms and you like group up the colors.
Uh-huh.
Like you learn that way, but then the teacher explains the importance behind it.
Yeah, and with a true discovery, the students would kind of just be kind of left on their own. Okay, now you figure it out, right? With just very, very little guidance. But generally, when we use discovery learning, the teacher is going to structure it a lot more and really give the scaffolding or help along the way.
For the little like cube things that you like break off. Do you guys?
No, I feel like I remember that, but
The
I
little
can't place what it
the
exactly
boys
looks
used to
like.
build like
They're
and make
like the
swords
little-
out of them and like.
And you see how long you can make the cubes? You don't know the
Maybe I
cubes.
don't remember this. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe this
I
came
know
after me.
exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, at least somebody knows what I'm talking about.
All right, constructivism. What type of processing do they use in the constructivist approach? What type of processing?
Top down.
Top-down processing. Okay, remember we also talked about how Vygotsky influenced constructivist approaches. Talked about mediated learning, right?
The difference between
Cognitive
Yes.
apprenticeship.
Because mediated is like a one-time thing, and then apprenticeship is like long-term.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, student teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But say you're in like a lower level education class, I guess, and you go one time and like teach the class, or you teach in your classroom there. It's like kind of like it's showing you like we did like a bullying lesson in my education class,
Mm-hmm.
and we got suggestions and stuff on it, and then we went back and we redid it because we were showing. But with student teaching, we would be under like another teacher
Mhm.
there,
Yeah, and they serve like as your mentor.
and that would be over and over again until
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
you have a mentor.
Yeah, I think if you think about it in terms of mentor, or having like
Like-
a mentorship might be.
The mediated learning is like you have your professor, like I have my Education 250 professor, and then you get into like student teaching, and you have your teacher that you're under when you're doing student teaching.
Okay. Yeah, and mediated learning in general is just anytime you learn from somebody more advanced than you. So anytime where they're helping you learn and scaffolding you, that's mediated learning. Okay. So mediated learning, cognitive apprenticeship. What other Vygotskian concept is part of constructivism? T. James, you said it not too long ago.
Ooh, zone of proximal development.
Zone of proximal development. Okay. Know what that is?
CPD?
The ZPD, yeah. What is it?
Wasn't that last test?
It's like learning.
It was last test,
It's
but
like
it's
scaffolding,
again.
basically.
What you know, what you can do with help, what you can't.
Yeah.
The little diagram. The
Uh-huh.
parts you know, don't know, or know with help, and then don't know.
Know the relationship between ZPD and cooperative learning.
What is that?
What is it? Can you guys tell me?
You can learn from the person about that cooperative learning, so it'll help you resolve.
Learning with help.
No, learning with
Mix.
other people. Wasn't it? No.
Cooperative learning is learning with other people. And so when we learn with other people in our classroom, so let's say we get into groups of mixed ability.
Yeah, it's a person that knows more can help the other student that don't know that much, but like but they have to be that smart student should like not know like too much, like he's too advanced, because that would be like out of ZPD, like.
Okay, yeah.
But he can
Exactly.
teach, they can teach each other.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
like an easy way to say relationship.
Okay, so basically the relationship is that when students work together, they can learn and teach the topics within each other's zone of proximal development. Okay, remember we talked about that today when, I think it was you, Amanda, who said that
Peer teaching, peer consulting.
maybe somebody said that they learn when someone teaches it on their level.
Yeah, because if you don't, it sounds like Charlie Brown and.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, and so that's what happens when we have these cooperative learning groups, that they're teaching at each other's level. Okay,
So you said relationship between ZPD and.
cooperative learning. Mm-hmm. Why Why are we talking about ZPD again? It has to do with learning.
Because in cooperative learning, like your peers will teach in your ZPD
Right.
better than the
Possibly better than the teacher, right? So that's one of the tasks of a teacher is to be able to teach within the ZPD. Okay, so that's why if you have a teacher who can present it in a way that you can understand it, then that's good, right? But why else? We're talking about constructivism. So why might we be talking about ZPD?
Because the ZPD goes just a little bit beyond what you currently know. So you're constructing a basis for a new set of information.
When that happens, but the simpler answer that I'm looking for, no, I mean, you're dead on, so you understand it for sure. Just a simpler answer is that Vygotsky is a constructivist. When we talked about ZPD before, when we talked about scaffolding, that was all constructivist material, okay? So we were just talking about it in terms of development because it's widely accepted as how we develop cognitively, and how we learn. But now that we're talking about constructivism specifically, we're going to reiterate it, okay? So remember, we said, how did Vygotsky influence constructivism? Zone of proximal development, mediated learning, cognitive apprenticeship, and, anybody remember? Social learning. All right, let's pretty much,
then humanistic education.
humanistic, since we talked about it today and we didn't talk about much, you guys could probably give me any questions that you guys have about it. Do know the different methods that we used in class, the peg word, the loci,
Jigsaw.
and then also the cooperative learning strategies. Know those learning strategies. How do we store memory in long term? How is it actually stored in your brain though? You
It's
rehearse it to get
schemata.
there, right, in your schemata, or your schemes. You store it in schemata,
And that was for my
in your long-term memory.
You said to know learning strategies and what else?
So remember the learning strategies when I had you guys remember the short-term, long-term, and sensory? You did, loci, method, peg word, paired associate, all those. Know those, and also know the cooperative learning strategies that we talked about. Jigsaw, STAD, or STAD, PALS, and cooperative scripting. Know what the research says on the how group work is beneficial, or when group work is beneficial. Do you guys remember? We just talked about that today.
Is there no research about when group work is beneficial?
When cooperative learning is beneficial. When the group has goals and when there's individual accountability.
And then taught cooperative learning strategies.
Yeah, when they're taught these strategies. All right, let me look. Bandura, remember he talked about social learning. So remember how that relates to operant conditioning. Can anybody tell me real quick, how does social learning relate to operant conditioning? So know this. How does social learning relate to operant conditioning? Bandura's theory. Remember I said he extended upon operant conditioning by saying that not
They
necessarily
need
about
feedback?
books.
Was that a thing? No.
No. Remember,
Are we
so
getting closer?
listen to the name. Theory of social or observational learning.
Observation.
So I can learn by observing someone else being reinforced or punished. Remember? Okay. We just touched on that briefly, but I want to make sure that you guys know that.
So by watching someone else being observed,
By watching somebody else being reinforced or punished.
So like vicarious.
Vicarious learning, exactly, vicarious learning. Okay, and then, levels of processing theory. I don't know about that question anymore.
did you say that?
levels of processing, and look over humanistic theory. Just look over what we talked about in class today. There wasn't too much on that. I think that's it. If you guys don't have any other questions for me, you should be fine. I'm gonna have a couple of fill in the blanks just to let you guys know.
We have like an essay.
They're still short answer and short essay.
Short answer, not so short answer.
Exactly.
Oh.
We can
Exactly.
call it that.
Do you guys have any questions?
Just a fill in the blank would have just be like definition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Comparative stuff.
What happens, real quickly,